The success of Operation Spring Breeze, when the troops of the German 5th Panzer Army, under General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, broke through the Allied line at Fade Pass, advanced through Sidi Bouzid and captured Spietla, has severely shaken the southern sector of the Tunisian front. Rather than exploiting his success, by pursuing the retreating American troops, on February 17, 1943, von Arnim decided to break contact with the enemy. He ordered the 10th Panzer Division to move north towards Fondauk Pass, while the 21st Panzer Division received orders to consolidate its positions near Spietla. On the same day, Field Marshal Rommel and the battle group of his Afrika Korps, advancing from the south, linked up with the forward elements of the 21st Panzer Division, just outside Kasserine Pass. When he learned about von Arnim's plan, Rommel became furious, as he had already sent his reconnaissance units into Kasserine Pass. Immediately, he called Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, the commander-in-chief of the German army in the Mediterranean, and demanded to place the 10th and 21st Armored Divisions under his command. Kesselring granted Rommel's request. However, since Kesselring doubted that Rommel's plan was too ambitious, he decided to revise his original plan, after consulting the Italian High Command. Instead of advancing towards Tebessa, after striking through Kasserine Pass, and turning right towards the coast, as Rommel had initially intended, Kesselring gave him a new, more achievable objective: the Kaf, deep behind the Allies' line. Rommel was disappointed with the proposed plan. He knew that he would have to split his forces in order to succeed. Also, Rommel was fully aware that the two main routes to Le Kaf, via Tala and Spibe, would be heavily defended. He ordered the 21st Panzer Division to move north from Spietla towards Spibe, while at the same time, the battle group of the Afrika Korps, under General Karl Bualoius, would strike through Kasserine Pass. The 10th Panzer Division, which was on its way from the Fondauk area, was to reinforce whichever of the two trusts showed better results. Von Arnim, however, refused to hand over the entire 10th Panzer Division to Rommel, and left some elements for himself, including Tiger tanks, of the 501st Panzer Abteilung, for smaller-scale attacks in the north. Nevertheless, Rommel was convinced that Green American troops stood no chance against battle-hardened veterans of his Afrika Korps. An entire precious day passed before Rommel received the orders to execute a new plan, designated as Operation Storm Flood, which arrived at Rommel's headquarters on the evening of February 18. Meanwhile, for the Allies, an extra day came as a blessing. General Lloyd Fredendall, commander of the 2nd U.S. Corps, used this time to regroup his demoralized troops, and further strengthen the defenses of Kasserine Pass. After suffering heavy losses at Sidi Bouzid and Spietla, the Allies had been scraping together what forces they could to guard Kasserine Pass. The first unit to arrive had been the 19th U.S. Engineer Regiment. On February 18, the 1st Battalion, 26th Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division, reinforced the positions of the 19th Combat Engineer Regiment, guarding the pass. Besides being narrow, Kasserine Pass, bounded by Jebel Semama and Jebel Chami hills, had another distinguished geographical feature, the Hatab River, which bisected the pass. The Hatab River, flooded by frequent rains, posed a serious obstacle to the attacking forces. Behind the narrow bottleneck, Kasserine's western entrance broadened to a wide basin that splits into two roads. One road led west to Tebessa, the vital Allied supply base, while the other trailed north to the town of Tala. The engineers set their hastily prepared defenses across the narrowest section of the pass, while the 1st Infantry Battalion took the position on the higher ground at Jebel Semama Hill. These units were supported by a few tanks of the 1st Company, 13 Armored Regiment, and tank destroyers of the 894th Tank Destroyer Battalion, while the 33rd Field Artillery Battalion provided artillery support. A few hours before the German attack, Fredendall sent Colonel Alexander Stark to take command of the defense at Kasserine Pass. From then on, the units in Kasserine Pass became known as the Task Force Stark. On its right flank, to the southwest, the rest of the 1st Infantry Division formed Task Force Velvet. Further north, 2 regiments of the 34th Infantry Division and the 18th Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division stood in the way of the 21st Panzer Division and held the line in front of Speber. In the early morning of February 19th, the Battle of Kasserine Pass began. The men of the 33rd Reconnaissance Battalion started the attack around 6:30 am, attempting to move through the pass. The Germans underestimated the American defenders, hoping that they were still disorganized and shaken by the defeats of the previous days. Soon, they discover that American defenses are well in place, and much stiffer than expected. Infantry and tank fire forced the advancing Germans to seek cover at the foothills of Jebel Chambi. When General Bulowius realized that the attack was not going well, he ordered Panzergrenadier Regiment Africa to advance and attack the 1st Battalion positions on Jebel Semama. As this attack also failed, around noon, Bulowius decided to commit his main tank force, Panzer Battalion Stoughton, into the battle. In contrast to the flat deserts of Libya and Egypt, the men of the Africa Corps in Tunisia found themselves in a completely new environment. Fighting in the mountains was something entirely new for them. The battle in the narrow area, where there was no room for maneuver, continued throughout the day. By nightfall, the German attack has stalled. While the 21st Panzer Division attack on Speber suffered the same fate as the attack on the Kasserine Pass, the Americans seem to have proved to be a much stronger opponent than Rommel had expected. The fighting continued into the night. The German patrols, throughout the night, tried to infiltrate American positions on the adjacent hills. The following morning, February 20th, came with rain, which prevented Germans from using their air support. Regardless of the weather, cold and mud, the Germans resumed the attack on Kasserine Pass. Supported by the fire of the new Naval multiple rocket launchers, the Germans made good progress. However, the American line still held on, until the afternoon, when the advanced elements of the 10th Panzer Division reached the area. While the 21st Panzer Division was still having difficulty breaking through the line at Speber, Rommel ordered the 10th Panzer Division to reinforce the Afrika Korps Kampfgruppe in its attempt to break through the American defenses at the pass. At 4:30 p.m., after artillery preparation, the Germans threw all they had in the attack down the middle of the pass. Overwhelmed by the German strength, the American defense collapsed. Engineers began to pull back from the pass, allowing the 10th Panzer Division to reach the road leading to Thala. The Allies tried to prevent the breakthrough by launching a counterattack with their armored reserves. The Germans repelled the counterattack with ease, inflicting heavy casualties on the Allies, destroying all the tanks of the 1st Company, 13 Armored Regiment. By evening, the American defenses had been shattered. The roads to Thala and Tebessa remained wide open. To make matters worse, the remnants of the 1st Infantry Battalion, and elements of various other retreating units, ended up isolated at the top of Jebel Semama. On this occasion, the Germans captured many American soldiers and equipment. Among other things, Germans captured many intact American armored semi-tracked vehicles, which they gladly returned to service on their side. During the night, the Germans made sure to secure their gain. Rommel sent his last reserve, 1 battalion of the Italian Centauro Division, to reinforce the German positions, on the road to Tebessa. While the 10th Panzer Division consolidated its defenses on the road to Thala. Meanwhile, the gravity of the situation required a quick Allied reaction. General Kenneth Anderson, the commander of the British First Army, sent Brigadier Cameron Nicholson, a deputy commander of the 6th Armoured Division, to take command of the 26th Armoured Brigade, and all other British, American and French units in the Thala sector. This hastily formed blocking force became known as Nick Force. At the same time, General Fredendall, known for issuing unclear orders from his underground headquarters near Tebessa, continued to raise confusion. As always, instead of giving the orders to the division commanders, he would issue orders directly to the regimental commanders. Unaware of Anderson's action, he ordered Colonel Paul Robinett, the commander of Combat Command B, of the 1st Armoured Division, to take command in the area, bypassing his divisional commander, General Orlando Ward. The Combat Command B took the position on the road to Tebessa. Fredendall also ordered units of the 1st Infantry Division to move into hills on the southwestern side of the pass. On the morning of February 21, Rommel visited troops on the front, uncertain what to do next. He still wanted to take Tebessa, the main Allied supply depot in the area. Nevertheless, he didn't want to give up the main objective, assigned to him by Kasserine and the Italian High Command, La CAF. While the exhausted men of the 21st Panzer Division still struggle in front of Speber, attacking defenders, 3 times the size of the German attacking force, with no prospect of success, he ordered the 10th Panzer Division to push on towards Thala, while Afrika Korps Kampfgruppe was to press on towards Tebessa. The result was 3 battle groups, scattered along different routes, none of which was strong enough to overcome the growing Allied resistance. Throughout the morning, Germans awaited the counterattack. In the afternoon, once it became evident that the Allies had no intention of attacking, the Germans continued to advance. The 10th Panzer Division had moved up the road to Thala, when they encountered the obsolete Crusader and Valentine tanks of the 26th Armoured Brigade at 4 p.m. The German tanks carefully stood out of range of the British tanks, and methodically destroyed one British tank after another. Suffering heavy losses, the 26th Armoured Brigade began to withdraw towards Thala. The Germans followed them closely. During the night, the German infantry, led by the captured British Valentine tank, infiltrated the British line. In the ensuing close combat, the men of the 10th Panzer Division overcame the last British defenders in front of Thala. The British lost 38 tanks and 28 guns, and 571 men were taken prisoner, but the stubborn defense prevented the Germans to enter Thala, as they had to stop for the night. Unlike their comrades of the 10th Panzer Division, the men of the Afrika Korps were less fortunate. After they resumed the attack, at 4:30 p.m., the forward German elements encountered well-prepared American positions. The American tanks, anti-tank guns and concentrated artillery fire stopped the Germans. With Hattab River on their right, and the blocked road up front, General Bulowius sent Panzergrenadier Regiment Africa to bypass the American position by moving from the south. After dark, the Germans moved south, and ended up taking Hill 812. By the end of the day, it became clear that the German attack was losing momentum. The Afrika Korps Kampfgruppe was scattered, unable to move forward, and forced to defend its left flank. On February 22, the Afrika Korps fought only defensive battles, pressured from 2 sides, by the Combat Command B, and the 1st Infantry Division. In the afternoon, men of the 16th Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, have retaken the Hill 812, preventing the rupture of the line. At Thala, the Allies were in a desperate situation. As the 10th Panzer Division had to stop for the night, General Anderson ordered all available units to reinforce his most endangered sector. During the night, companies and platoons of various units poured towards Thala. As part of reinforcements, Anderson had scraped was the entire artillery of the 9th U.S. Infantry Division, which arrived at Thala during the night, after crossing 1,100 kilometers from Morocco in 4 days. Shortly before dawn, Brigadier Nicholson ordered the remnants of the 26th Armored Brigade to make a final, almost suicidal attack on the German positions in front of Thala. Only 5 tanks reached German lines, and were quickly knocked out. The sacrificial attack of the 26th Armored Brigade, and sudden artillery barrage, by the reinforced Thala defenders, interrupted German plans. The 10th Panzer Division commander, General Friedrich von Broich, postponed the planned attack, set for 7 a.m. He expected that artillery barrage was a prelude for a major counterattack, so he shifted to defense. For the rest of the day, both sides engaged in an artillery duel. Moreover, a clear weather allowed Allied air power to intervene. The P-38 fighters strafed von Broich's positions without rest. By the end of the day, the German advance against Thala stalled. In the afternoon, Kasserine visited Rommel at his forward command post. After assessing the situation, they both agreed that although losses had been relatively light, further offensive does not have a perspective, and can only lead to additional consumption of precious fuel and ammunition. The only path of advance, still open, was the road through Thala. However, Luftwaffe reconnaissance suggested that the Allies were moving reinforcements in this direction. Even if Germans penetrated the line in Thala, the Afrika Korps Kampfgruppe was too weak to protect the 10th Panzer Division's flank. Also, they both were afraid that Montgomery's 8th Army would soon be ready for operations against Mereth Line. Because of that, they decided to send remnants of the Afrika Korps to reinforce the 1st Italian Army at the Mereth Line. In the afternoon, on February 22, Rommel ordered his troops to pull back from Kasserine area. During the night, Axis troops began to withdraw in good order. The following day, American troops, unaware of Axis withdrawal, stood firmly in their positions, anticipating yet another attack. It was not until February 24 that Allies recaptured Kasserine Pass. German losses at Kasserine were 201 killed, 536 wounded, and 252 men missing, totaling 989 casualties. In material, Germans lost 20 tanks, 67 vehicles and 14 guns. Allied forces captured 73 German, and 535 Italian soldiers. American losses totaled 300 killed, 3,000 wounded, and 3,000 missing. Also, the Allies lost 183 tanks, 104 half-tracks, 208 guns, 512 trucks and motor vehicles. After the battle at Kasserine Pass, Kesselring made changes in the Axis command structure. With the approval of the Italian High Command, he formed Army Group Africa, under Rommel's command. A few days earlier, General George S. Patton replaced Fredendall as commander of the 2nd U.S. Corps. The fighting in Tunisia continued for the next 2 months, until the final Axis defeat in North Africa.